Hello everybody, 2016 is finally wrapping up in a few days, so I wanted to finally do my top 10 best movies of 2016. And 2016 has been not kind to a lot of people. We've had a lot of celebrity deaths, we've had a lot of really bad things happening in people's lives in 2016, but in my opinion, we had some pretty dang good movies this year, in my personal opinion. I know a lot of people think otherwise, but I thought we had a lot of really good films, so I'm finally here to talk about those. Just a disclaimer, before I start this review, I just wanted to say I did not see every single movie that came out in 2016. That is either because those movies are limited until January and I could not see them, or my parents just didn't let me see them all together. But I have seen a good total of movies this year, so I think my list has a lot of merit. Before I do start the list, I do have some honorable mentions. Let's go through them now. Jason Bourne, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, Star Trek Beyond, Moana, Ouija Origin of Evil, Deepwater Horizon, and Fences. Alright, those are my honorable mentions, and now it's time to get to the actual list. Here we go, starting with number 10. Sing Street is a movie that I actually didn't get a chance to review. I watched this movie on Netflix and I didn't get a chance to review it, but constantly while watching this movie, I was floored because this is such a simple concept of a film. It's literally just about a guy who has a really depressing life and starts to try to impress a girl by joining a rock band. That's basically the only concept of this movie, and the way it was directed and the way this movie was made really was good. There was a lot of great humor, the soundtrack was great, Sing Street was terrific. Zootopia is one of the earlier movies I saw in 2016, and this movie floored me. This movie was fantastic. In my opinion, it's one of the best Disney movies to come out in recent years. I think this movie is absolutely fantastic. It had great humor, the concept was really good and fun. Kids can appreciate this movie if they watch it. They'll have a lot of fun and appreciate this film for what it is, for it being entertaining and very enjoyable. But for adults, they can enjoy the themes that they put in this movie, because there are a lot of deep themes of this movie that the movie did have a lot to say, and it was very mature. The themes behind this movie were so mature, and it floored me, and the characters in this movie also floored me, and the detective aspect of this movie was also brilliant. Jon Favreau's Jungle Book, a movie that I loved. This movie was awesome. This is the most visually stunning movie I've ever seen in my life, but the visuals don't overshadow the great story and the great characters, because I thought the characters and the story in this movie were great. I love Neil Sethi in this movie as Mowgli. I love Bill Murray. I loved Idris Elba, and it did things with the story that I thought improved upon the original cartoon. I love the cartoon, but I felt like the stuff they did in this movie was even better in it. This is how you make a remake. This movie improved upon everything that the original movie had to offer, and that's why Jungle Book, I really respect it. Jon Favreau, I can't wait to see what else you do, even though I'm very skeptical for your Lion King movie. Kubo and the Two Strings is a movie I knew nothing about going in. I knew basically nothing about the movie. This movie is my favorite animated film of the entire year. It was drastically original, drastically mature. I watched this movie again because I got the Blu-ray for Christmas, and I was still floored by the movie. This movie is fantastic. Laika continues to make incredible animated films, and I think they could become the next Pixar as their career keeps going on. Characters in this movie were fantastic. There was twists that happened in the story that I didn't expect. It's basically the closest to a Legend of Zelda movie that we're ever gonna get, because that's what I really loved about this movie. It felt like The Legend of Zelda, and that was really great, and Kubo and the Two Strings is my favorite animated film of the year. I loved it. 10 Cloverfield Lane, a movie I'm not seeing on a lot of lists, actually. I'm not seeing this movie very high up in a lot of lists, but I thought it was spectacular. I loved this film. This film is honestly a film that I've seen 4 times, and it gets better and better as it goes along. Yes, there are flaws in the climax of this movie. The ending does have a few problems that I didn't really like, but this movie leading up to the climax is all spectacular. There are so many things while rewatching this movie that I noticed that I didn't even notice before. John Goodman is Oscar-worthy in this film. The characters are all great. Mary Elizabeth Winstead also did a great job. Damien Chazelle is one of the main writers of this movie, the director of Whiplash and La La Land, and it shows because the writing in this movie is literally genius. There are so many things in the writing that I didn't even notice the first time I watched it. It's a movie shrouded in mystery, and it caused a lot of speculation. Me and my dad would watch this movie, and we would talk about what John Goodman's past must have been like, because there are so many mysteries in this film, and it's such a great expansion to the Cloverfield universe, and I can't wait for God's Particle. Star Wars Rogue One, a movie not a lot of people loved as much as I did. A lot of people thought this movie was good but not great. I personally loved it. I thought this movie was an excellent prequel. In fact, it's one of the best prequels I've ever seen to a film. This movie is everything that the Star Wars prequels that George Lucas made should have been. This movie leads up to A New Hope perfectly, while also giving very intriguing characters that I really loved and I'm going to remember for a long time. Each Star Wars movie that has come out has given us such good characters, and I felt like Rogue One also did that. A lot of people have been complaining about the characters in this movie, but I loved them and I thought they were very memorable, and I'm going to remember them for years to come. Visuals in this movie were fantastic. The action scenes that were like Saving Private Ryan, I absolutely loved. And I loved the ending to this film with Darth Vader, and all the things that happened in the ending of this movie that tied into A New Hope was perfection, and I loved it. I feel like this film is kind of underappreciated because I loved it a lot. Sure, it's not a perfect film. I think Force Awakens is a better film, but this film definitely does deserve a lot of respect because I thought it was great. Hacksaw Ridge is a movie that floored me. I love this movie a lot. Andrew Garfield in this movie was so great. I only saw him as Spider-Man before this, and in this movie, he blew me away because I didn't like him as Spider-Man, but in this movie I was like, oh my gosh, this guy is incredible. Romance in this movie was really touching between him and Teresa Palmer. Teresa Palmer is a really good actress, and I love the romance between them in this movie, and I love the war scenes, even if they were super hard to watch. Throughout this movie, I had so much tension while watching this film. It was so hard to watch, but in the best possible way, because that's what this movie's supposed to be. It's not glorifying violence. This movie just depicts the hardships of war. It depicts what war actually was. And after this movie, I was completely speechless because I was thinking in my head that this actually happened, and this was a very interesting look on World War II, and I absolutely loved it. The only reason it's not higher up in this list is just because I don't feel like I could watch this movie a lot other times, and the movies above this, my top 3, I probably could watch over and over. Arrival is a movie that surprised the heck out of me. I loved this film. While going into this movie, a lot of people were saying, oh, it's just going to be another generic alien invasion movie, but what I loved about Arrival so much is that this movie was drastically original. I love this film when I saw it because this film is totally different. This film is completely original. It's a movie about two races communicating, and it's a movie that tests your brain power. While watching this movie, I had to think and speculate and think about this movie while I slept the night after I saw it. That's what I loved about this film the most, is that it's a movie that makes you think. It's a movie that makes you use your brain and put pieces together. I love things that do that. I love movies and shows and games that have little puzzle pieces that you're supposed to put together in your head, and it doesn't spoon feed information into your mouth. Amy Adams is Oscar-worthy in this film. I think this is her best performance ever, and I think Arrival is definitely a movie that everyone needs to check out if they're a film fan. This movie is one of the best alien movies I've ever seen, and it's not even like an alien invasion movie. It's totally different. Captain America: Civil War. This movie was spectacular. I was so excited for this movie going in. I was super excited, but I was a little bit skeptical because, you know, you have to balance a lot of things in this movie. You have a villain, you have all the characters, there's so many characters you have to introduce, and I thought they did it perfectly. The way they introduced Spider-Man and Black Panther in this movie, perfect. This movie, I can't think of a single way that this movie could have been better. I think this film is literally one of the best comic book movies ever made. It balanced out things perfectly. It balanced out the story with the character, and each character in this movie had a clear motivation for what they were doing. Constantly in this movie, I was switching between Team Cap and Team Iron Man because I couldn't decide which team I wanted to join, which is so impressive because this movie is literally chock full of characters and plot points that they need to put in this movie and not make it feel messy like Batman v Superman. The villain I thought in this movie was great. Robert Downey Jr. is the best best he's ever been as Iron Man. Spider-Man being in this movie was absolutely spectacular. The action in this movie is some of the best action I think I've ever seen in a comic book film. This is one of the best comic book films ever made, and if you're a fan of comic book films, or maybe even if you're a fan of films and not comic book movies in general, you'd probably still like this movie. You guys all saw this coming. La La Land was my most anticipated film of the entire year. The trailers for this movie, I loved. This was my Force Awakens of 2016 because I was so excited for this film to the point where I was skeptical that it might end up being disappointing, and when I saw this movie, I was absolutely pleased. Damien Chazelle is one of the best directors I've ever seen, and I've only seen 2 of his films. Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling in this movie both give Oscar-worthy performances. I would be surprised if they weren't nominated for Best Actor. The cinematography in this movie was perfect. The musical numbers were perfect. The themes in this movie about following your dreams and the consequences of what can happen while following your dreams and the sacrifices you're going to have to make floored me. This movie made me tear up. There are sad themes in this movie. It's not sunshine and rainbows like Singing in the Rain. This movie is literally a deep film. And this movie is the best musical I've ever seen in my life and one of the best films I've ever seen. This is in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. I think it's even better than Whiplash, and this is literally everything that I would want in a film. This movie combines my favorite musical genre, jazz, with excellent writing and excellent filmmaking, and anyone who has flaws with this movie is probably nitpicking, because this movie is literally perfect, and Damien Chazelle, I need to give this guy a man hug because he's incredible. La La Land is the most entertaining film of the year, it has the best score of the year, it has the best themes of the year, it has the best acting of the year, it has the best direction of the year. This movie is literally a masterpiece. And it was everything I wanted, and I was so happy for this movie to be absolute perfection. Alright guys, that's my top 10 list of 2016. I had a lot of fun with the movies of 2016, even if a lot of people didn't like the movies that came out this year. I thought it was a pretty good year, honestly, and I enjoyed a lot of the movies that have come out, and it was so much fun to make this list. I can't wait for 2017. It's going to be so much fun. And if you're new to this channel, be sure to like this video, be sure to subscribe, be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. And tune in for my worst list, which will hopefully happen tomorrow or sometime very soon. I can't wait to bring that to you guys because there were a lot of stinkers this year as well. Alright guys, bye-bye.